The Democratic support for Vice President Kamala Harris is now falling apart at the seams as two Joes are now going against her. One is Senator Joe Manchin, a very polarizing figure within their ranks. The other is President Joe Biden. Now, I know you're probably wondering how he's ruining Kamala's chances, but we'll get to that later. But here's Joe Manchin's huge issue with the vice president.
For once, this is actually not a big Harris flip-flop this cycle. She has had that position about the filibuster since 2022, but it is the thing that she is choosing to make issue one in a rare media appearance, that she would blow up Senate rules to bring back the abortion access guaranteed by Roe.
I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
The retiring Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, whose influence always came from never being a sure yes vote for his party's plans, says now that Harris wanting to blow up the filibuster means she has blown her shot at his vote.
I think I've been very clear my whole career is that the 60-vote threshold that we basically operate under in the Senate is essential.
Would you endorse her for president then?
I'm not endorsing. I'm not endorsing.
Now, Whoopi Goldberg wasn't exactly happy with Joe Manchin's words against Harris. In The View, Goldberg stated that if Manchin wasn't endorsing Harris, then they're not endorsing Manchin. Now, the big difference is that he's retiring from the Senate, so he really doesn't give a flip. And though this doesn't mean that he's moving away from politics, his retirement also gives way to a Republican Senate. And speaking of The View, they recently had President Joe Biden on as a guest. It was one big love fest for the president as their host literally kissed his you-know-what for a good 10, maybe even 15 minutes. But the interview didn't go so well because he kind of put the vice president in some very hot waters. Now, they started this off by painting him as a hero for giving way to Kamala Harris's presidential run. And guys, just want to thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. Thank you for hitting the like button on the video. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and sharing these videos on social media. You guys are awesome.
Mr. President, it was only 2 months ago that you decided to step aside from seeking re-election, putting your country first above any personal ambition, and passing the torch to the vice. It's like having one of the Beatles at the table. And you passed the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. What have these past 2 months felt like, and are you at peace with your decision?
Well, I am at peace with my decision. Look, when I ran this last term, I said that I saw myself as a transition president. Yeah. Transitioning to a new generation of leadership.
Now, we've been told by mainstream media that Joe Biden stepping down was the right thing to do. It was best for the Democratic Party as well as for the United States of America. And as you guys heard, the president says that he's at peace with his decision. But the real question, is he really? Now, I'm sure you guys remember when he had to put on a MAGA hat in front of multiple Trump supporters. This was seen as him giving the elites within the Democratic Party the big, huge middle finger. He was even seen boarding Air Force One with the hat in hand. This seemed to be intentional, especially when you got Nancy Pelosi gaslighting all of us to say that Kamala Harris won the primary.
You had reportedly said you wanted a sort of an open primary if Joe Biden stepped down. Did you change your mind because you saw all the excitement around Kamala Harris?
No, I didn't change my mind. We had an open primary and she won it. Nobody else got in the race because she was politically astute and
whatever helps Pelosi sleep at night, you know what I mean? But most of us are already aware that they pissed Joe Biden off with this move. And while he may still be bitter about this coup, this instance from The View seems more like a slip of the tongue. The Harris campaign has done its best to try and distance itself from Bidenomics, even though Kamala Harris herself in the past has touted that it's worked for the American people. She's also distanced herself from being the border czar, given how millions of illegal immigrants have entered the country during their term. But Joe Biden just doesn't seem to be aware of Kamala Harris's campaign and its goals because he said this.
Mr. President, the vice president has been working hard to get her message out to voters, and she's been drawing large crowds. crowds are a thing for some people. There is momentum among Democrats.
For as long as you count right.
There is some momentum among Democrats that we're seeing. As the only person who has ever beaten Trump, what advice have you given the vice president about how to win?
Be herself. Look, she is smart as hell, number one.
Yeah.
She's tough. She was a first-rate prosecutor. She is a United States senator of significant consequence. And as vice president, there wasn't a single thing that I did that she couldn't do. And so I was able to delegate her responsibility on everything from foreign policy to domestic policy.
And there you have it, guys. President Joe Biden has confirmed that the Vice President Kamala Harris was extremely active in terms of her policy during his term. Policies that many Americans are not in favor of. We also just can't ignore the fact that Joe Biden said Harris was tough. However, not enough to take on tough questions. There's only a few weeks until the presidential elections, guys, and she's not faced any journalist who would push her on issues. Meanwhile, we got Donald Trump and JD Vance accepting questions from almost anyone and everyone. But getting back to the president here, guys, it's very clear that he wants to tell us something. It's almost like he's speaking in code. He wants to tell the American people that whatever we're experiencing right now is not just due to his actions. As he said, he delegated a lot of responsibility to the vice president. I mean, he couldn't handle it. He was mentally incompetent. So basically, Kamala Harris has been running the United States for the last 3.5 years, which in turn means she is involved with inflation. She's involved with the decisions made in Afghanistan. She is a key figure when it comes to the influx of illegal immigrants into our country. She's also helped send billions upon billions of dollars to the Ukraine, all behind the guys hiding behind Joe Biden, making it look like he did all this. And I think Joe Biden made a big, huge mistake here because he's confirming that a Harris term would almost be the same as another Biden term at the White House, which, guys, like I said, it's against what the Harris campaign is going for. So this could very well mean Joe Biden fighting his own feelings about what happened behind the scenes. I mean, he wants to make Harris look good, but at the same time, he believed that he was the only guy for the job. And them pushing Joe Biden to the side like an old pair of house shoes and saying that it wasn't a coup, this has slowly gotten to him. So a few years ago, I stumbled upon this old, worn out book at a thrift store. It was like a Goodwill or something with a handwritten note inside the cover, and it read, "This changed my life. Hope it does the same for you." So this was just this random note that was stuck inside of this book. Now I was intrigued and I bought it for $1.50. And that little investment, guys, turned out to be the best one I ever made. In fact, the principles in that book literally opened up my eyes to how money really works. And they became the foundation for my journey to financial independence. Now, I'm sharing everything that I learned and more inside the Liberty Pursuit Network, guys. Make sure you click the link in the description down below. Join us today if you're ready to change your life too. But there was a point here where he again attacked Donald Trump and suggested violence against the former president. Here's Whoopi Goldberg calling Trump a bug.
He was like a bug. He just kept being there. He was like a bug right there. Zzz. So you felt... And that's what was needed, and you did it, and I just want to say thank you.
You mean like a roach? They also want to set this narrative that voting for Kamala Harris would give us the first black woman president. And yet they demonize anyone who goes against their set of norms. We could see it clearly with Janet Jackson. Now, I expect that her camp will probably give in to the pressure and that she'll release an apology straight out of ChatGPT, but only because she has to, not because she wants to. And it's because of the culture now that values being the first at anything, because they also want to be able to report that Kamala Harris is again possibly the first black woman president. But if you were to ask them, is she even the right fit for the job? Then you would be considered a racist or sexist, maybe even both. And so guys, this is what we're dealing with right now. And I think it becomes very simple when you put it this way. If you're gonna vote, vote with your wallet in mind. It's as simple as that. Much simpler than asking the vice president what she plans on doing for the economy. Now, I think liberal media has a sign in their dressing room that just says, whatever happens, blame it on Trump. It's kind of like they're committed to pulling him into all these different conversations just to try to make the guy look bad. We got to make Donald Trump the bad guy. That's what they're all being told to do. But the problem is that even those within the black community aren't all that convinced that Kamala Harris is even black. And Janet Jackson is involved in these conversations where she herself is not convinced that Kamala Harris is what she says she is. I'm not sure why they don't get this and why they feel as if they need to blame Donald Trump for everything. Although I get that they want voters to think Trump's a racist.
Why do they like you better than any other Republican in modern time?
Well, you have to ask the other Republicans.
I mean, I'm just saying, you see black support going up with you, Hispanic, young people. Like I said, the people look more like me than you, and they say you're different. Why?
Because I did things in office that nobody else has done. Criminal justice reform. I did criminal justice reform at a level that nobody thought was possible to get. And I did that largely for the black and Hispanic community. They're the ones that wanted it. Opportunity zones with Tim Scott. And he was so much in favor of it. And it's probably maybe the best economic development package ever for African Americans, for Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans. We did a lot of things that people couldn't believe we were able to get done.
That's why I am committed to passing a Green New Deal, creating clean jobs, and finally putting an end to fracking once and for all.
Mama Kamala just don't give a frack.
I bet she gives a frack now, especially with voters in Pennsylvania. Fracking is a key issue to the state. Because of this, Harris has changed her position. But if you ask Senator John Fetterman on this, he would say that, we shouldn't even be talking about it.
The issue of fracking, I know you've talked about this quite a bit. Vice President Harris, as you know, once supported a ban on fracking when she was running for president in 2020. She even sued the Obama administration to prevent fracking off California's coast. Now she says she will not ban the practice as president. Why should voters trust that that is really what the vice president believes?
It's so strange why we just keep talking about fracking. Back in 2020, I said that that might be an issue, but it's not going to be a defining issue. And now in 2024, we're still trying to talk about fracking. And now the other side, they're talking about eating cats and geese and dogs and saying absurd things and talking about how if Trump doesn't win, he said that, you have to blame the Jews on that, and just absurd things, like having a serious policy conversation when the other side is just absolutely on fire. And here's where we are. And here we are also that it's going to be very close in Pennsylvania, and it's not going to be defined by fracking.
And black women like Janet Jackson are not falling for it. In fact, she's not apologizing to the vice president, which has liberal mainstream media in a frenzy to try and attack the pop star. And a supposed representative apologized for Janet Jackson, something that she's also refused to acknowledge given that this person is not a part of her team. But I want you guys to look at how The View twisted this story and made it about Donald Trump, even though Janet Jackson never even mentioned Trump's name.
We don't know what she said because it's been one thing and another. Look, I think Janet Jackson, like every other American, whether you're a celebrity or not, has a right to endorse, support, or not support whomever they want. So she's got every right to not like Kamala Harris if she doesn't want to.
But that's not what she said.
What she doesn't know, what she did was spread misinformation. And I think it's very irresponsible when you have a platform the way Janet Jackson does to use that platform carelessly to spread misinformation based on a racist allegation by Donald Trump. Right? It was Donald Trump who tried to say Kamala Harris just turned black.
Does anyone think that John Fetterman's just a complete idiot? Pennsylvania, this is your senator, and he doesn't believe that fracking is an issue in your state at all, even with 86% of residents in the state saying that fracking was good for the economy. And the poll was taken back in 2022. How much more of a difference would that make in 2024 when more people are struggling with the cost of living? Now, the same survey also found that almost half of the state is in favor of continuing the practice. And here's what's really funny about this, guys. Fetterman himself has also contradicted himself when it comes to fracking. In 2016, he called it a stain on their state. By 2018, he stood firm and said that he doesn't support it at all. By 2022, he says that he absolutely supports fracking. What the frack is going on with these Democrats? CNN's own Abby Phillips said Harris's recent interview with the National Association of Black Journalists, the NABJ, lacked specifics, but the panelists that she had on, they were just scrambling to defend the Democratic presidential nominee.
Black journalists today at the NABJ pressed Vice President Kamala Harris on policies from guns to the war in Gaza, but many of her answers lacked specifics, and some Democrats, like Hillary Clinton, told Kara Swisher that that's perfectly fine.
I'm not sure I agreed with her when she said it, but it was interesting for her to say it because I think she was talking strategically, politically, is that she doesn't have to say too much. I think probably most people agree they should say more because, as Audie Cornish of this network said, a lot of people are Kamala curious. And if you look at the statistics, I think Kirsten talked about them last night, Kristen did, that people want to know more. from Kamala Harris.
This is at the heart of what voters want to know about her. She should have something that is really quick and understandable, and that wasn't really it.
She has to do three things, I agree. Actually, there's one other thing. Answer the question. She got the same question at the debate. And you know what else? When I went back and watched the debate again, every single policy question she got at the debate, she totally ignored and never answered it. Why is it that she believes she does not have to answer to journalists who are asking pretty basic questions of
Now, to really understand what Kamala Harris is trying to hide by evading all these hard questions, we need to just kind of like look at who she is exactly. An undeniable part of what some would argue is the worst administration in U.S. history. Because see guys, despite what the propaganda media would have you believe, it's the economy that is preventing Vice President Kamala Harris from breaking through with the American people. So no matter how much puffed positive coverage the media gives her, she just can't seem to establish a clear lead. Why? Well, one made up word: Bidenomics. More precisely, it's the impact on the economy for which Kamala Harris is partly responsible. I mean, you guys saw the clips. On the rare occasion where Kamala Harris actually allows someone from the press to publicly ask her about the economy, she gives the strangest answers. You could even call it weird if you want. During the ABC News presidential debate, David Muir asked her, when it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? And guess what? Kamala Harris said that she was raised as a middle-class kid and gave a clumsy biographical answer which included zero policy. A few days later, during her only interview since the debate, her response to a question from anchor Brian Taff about her specific plans for the economy, it was better memorized but equally unresponsive. And yes, it was still about growing up as a middle-class kid, that she grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn. Y'all remember that line, right? Because what else would she talk about? Bidenomics? For nearly 4 years, she and Joe Biden have been claiming that Bidenomics would bring down the cost of living, invest in infrastructure, empower families, and make life better for all Americans. Well, here we are, 4 years later, and it just simply hasn't happened. And hey, that's not going to stop her from making the same claims about her mystery plan on the campaign trail. Don't believe me? Just look at the numbers. Rasmussen reports found that only 20% of Americans wanted policies in general to stay the same. Nearly 3 out of 4, or 73%, do want things to change. Only 23% said economic conditions were improving. By contrast, 52% said that things were getting worse. In parallel, Scott Rasmussen, a separate polling outfit, reported that only 26% of Americans thought that the economy was excellent or good. Now, a full 74% rated the economy poor. Just check out this breakdown from Fox's Laura Ingraham.
The devil's bargain. That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, I want you to ignore most of the commentary you've heard from the pundit class on the debate last night. As usual, the talking heads misread the concerns of millions of Americans watching at home. Tonight, I'm going to give you the key takeaways from the debate. First, ABC's moderators were essentially acting as Kamala Harris's debate coaches. Time and again, they served up softballs with zero follow-ups.
Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. What would you do to fight climate change?
A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
You're great. Do you agree you're great? Now, this was entirely predictable. Now, remember, a top exec at Disney, whose portfolio includes ABC News, is a longtime pal of Kamala Harris. But another key point, and I think very, very important, is that Vice President Harris showed us last night that she's really not a lot more than a puppet of the failed D.C. establishment. Now, she took weeks to rehearse, during which she said had no adversarial press interviews, and then, with a friendly panel, showed that she can memorize some lines and speak in platitudes. From the start, Harris knew she would not be fact-checked or asked real follow-up questions. But still, even with her absurd ABC running mates helping her, Harris revealed a lot about herself. And the picture was not altogether positive. Regular Americans who don't sit in studios like this, who don't get paid to talk for a living, will not be moved.
She didn't talk about her policy changes between 2020 and 2024. Her whole
centrist, moderate stance is just a facade.
She's saying she can fix the problems that her administration has caused, but I just don't know if I can afford to take that risk.
All these policies that she's saying she's going to implement on day one of presidency, why does she have to wait until, January 20th to do that?
So yeah, it wasn't just Laura Ingraham or Fox News. Even voters are unconvinced by that ABC debate and Kamala Harris. Good to see that after 2 failed assassination attempts, Democrats are still pushing for Trump to get killed. That's absolutely insane. Strong sarcasm, guys. But speaking of which, did you guys know that Sean Diddy Combs is on suicide watch? And it seems that something much bigger is actually going on in New York City, as Mayor Eric Adams just got indicted. Make sure you guys watch my previous live stream because I cover it all and more in that video. As always, thank you guys for hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys on the next